Hi everyone, this is Cheryl, your instructor for the CCA Web Design 1 course. This class session we're going to cover div tags, an introduction to them, how to create them and how to format them. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. You can see here I have a document created. It's called Div Tag Demo. And to create a div tag, you want to go to your Insert menu and pull down to Layout Objects. Here is div tag. Go ahead and select that. And notice that here in the Insert Div Tag dialog box, in the Insert field, you have a choice here of three different kind of positions to place the div tag on your web page. You can place it at insertion point or after start of tag or before the end of a tag. And that could be like any tag in HTML. In this case, since it's a brand new document, I only have two. And you can see that down here in the tag selector. I have my body tag and I have my paragraph tag. I'm going to go ahead and just create the div tag at my insertion point, which is where my cursor is located in the HTML document, which is right here below this heading 1 of div tags. Then I can link a style sheet to format my div tag by clicking the new CSS rule button. And I'll go ahead and click that. And then this week we're going to learn a new type of tag selector type for CSS of the ID. And this applies to only one HTML element. And what it refers to is you can apply an ID identifier or keyword to any HTML element like a div tag, or even a paragraph or an H1 or an H2 tag. But in this case, it is for the div tag, and I'm going to name it. So if I come over here, I can create whatever I want that name to be. I'll go ahead and put this as my header div for the name of this div tag. And then down here, this might look familiar. Have been doing this for your CSS rules. Is where do I want my rule to be defined in? And I have a choice of this document, which is an internal style sheet, or a new style sheet file. I'm going to choose new style sheet. And when I click OK, it will open up a Save Style Sheet As dialog box. And I'll just call this my demo style sheet. And I'll go ahead, you can see it's here in my div tags local root directory. And if you're not there, you can always click the site root button and it will take you to your defined local root directory. And then I'll go ahead and click save, and it will save that style sheet in my local root directory. Then it advances on to opening up the CSS rule definition dialog box, and here I can go ahead and set what I want my fonts and font properties to be for this div tag. I can set a background image or background color. And here I'm going to go ahead and create just a color so we can see what's going on here. And then I can come down here to the box category and set a width as well as a height for this div tag. And for the sake of this demo, I'm going to create a 960 pixel div tag in width, and I'm going to give it about a 45 pixel height for this div tag, the header div tag. Here for the padding is kind of the inside area from the border of the element to whatever it contains. Gives it space from the content of what's in the div tag to the edges. And then you also can set a margin. We'll get into these in just a minute. But for right now, I'm just going to set these up with a width and a height, and I'm going to go ahead and create a border as well. And here you must set for borders, any borders that you add to HTML, you must set a style, a width, as well as a color. So I'll go ahead and click the style here, and I'm going to keep the same for all option turned on because I want it to be the same style for the top, right, bottom, and left side of my border. I'll go ahead and choose solid, and then for the width I'll set this as a 1 pixel width, but notice you do have a choice of thin, medium, and thick, or a value, which is the default setting. And for the color, I'll go ahead and just make this black. And when I click OK to this, I come back to the Insert Div Tag dialog box, add insertion point, which we set when we started the process. But right here for the ID, I can see that those settings have been linked and the ID name of header div has been applied to this div tag. Now I'll go ahead and click OK. And you'll see on my screen, I now have a yellow background, black 1 pixel border, div tag set to 960 pixels across and 45 pixels down. Now I'll go ahead and create another div tag. By their very nature, div tags stack on each other. So I'm going to go ahead and add another one. And I'll again do Insert. And down to Layout Objects, Div Tag. Opens up the Insert Div Tag dialog box. Again, I have a choice of where I want to put it. And notice because I already have a div tag on my screen, I still have it at insertion point where I can add it wherever my cursor is located, or I can do it before a tag, after the start of a tag, before the end of a tag, or after a tag. Now in this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose after a tag, and notice that when I make that selection, I now have a choice of what tag do I want to put it after in regards to other div tags I've created. So notice here, the only one really on there is the header div tag, and I want this new div tag to come after the header div tag. So I choose after tag and designate the tag of header div tag. Then again, I'll come down here and set up my CSS rule for this div tag. Again, I want it to be an ID. I'm going to go ahead and call this one navigation div, and again I want it to be associated with my demo style sheet, so I'll go ahead and choose that as where the style rule will reside. Then I'll go ahead and click OK, and again I can set up how I want this to look. Well, again, I'm going to go ahead and add a background color just so we can see it, and this one I'll go ahead and make it a light green. And then I can go ahead and add a border, and again I need to fill out all 3 properties here. So I'll choose solid, 1 pixel, and a color of black. And I'll go ahead and keep those settings. I'll say OK to this and double check myself after tag. Here's the div name, everything looks good. Click OK. And notice that this one goes all the way out to the end of the page in design view. And if you'll remember from when we created this top div tag, we set and I will hover over it, and you'll see I now have this little yellow drop down kind of property inspector box, and notice that it tells me the width was 960 and the height was 45 pixels. Well, I can set that for this navigation div, and to do that I need to go into my CSS. So I'll pull this out and notice that here I have my, let me close this internal style sheet. I have my header div and my navigation div. Well, I want to add properties to this navigation div. So there it is. I'll go ahead and double click it, which opens up the CSS rule definition dialog box. I'll go back to the box category, and then I'll set my width again to match my other one of 960 pixels. And I'll go ahead and set a height for this one of 35 pixels. And I'm not going to set padding and margin right now. I'll say OK to that. And notice that now my div tags are stacked one on top of each other, which is by their nature how they are created. So let's go ahead and create 2 more divs, and these are going to be divs that actually sit side by side. Now, when we covered images in the past couple of weeks in this class, you should have learned the float property on how to get an image to float to the left or to float to the right of a paragraph or a heading. Well, we can use that same float property of CSS to float a div tag left and right of each other.